listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast, the show where I speak to members of bands, artists of all kinds about their survival, how they've managed to get by, and hopefully include some of the best and the worst sideline jobs they've had over the years. I speak to Ritzy Bryan from the Joy Formidable on today's episode. Their new album, Into the Blue, is out now. You can get it on Hassle Records from their website. We talk about their music club, the Joy Formidable Music Club, how the album wouldn't have been made without all your support, without people getting involved in that side of their world. And I find that stuff just so interesting. I think the way that we listen to music now, the way that we interact with bands, that personal connection is totally the future. Bands building their own worlds, making their own connection points, using their imagination to do different stuff outside of the music, which totally does play into the records. So thank you so much for listening to this chat. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I appreciate each and every one of you who listens to these chats. It's something that I really love doing, and I think getting these stories from these artists just, for me, adds a whole new level to the albums of the people that I'm speaking to. East London Signature Brew have been brewing beers with bands since 2011. They've made beers with Mastodon, Idols, Sports Team, Hot Chip. And if you want to get some of their flagship beers delivered directly to your door, go on to signaturebrew.co.uk. And when you make your order, if you use 101 podcast as a voucher code, you can get 10% off. All right, here's Ritzy Bryan from the Joy Formidable. Go well. Cheers!
I've had a house out here now for about 8 years. So we've been here a lot longer than expected. We came over here in February last year, expecting only we actually came to pick up some gear and stuff. You know, that's the lovely thing about touring internationally, is like occasionally you go, hang on, where's such and such? And you realise you've left it 6,000 miles away. And you have to go and pick it up or figure something out. So we came back to do a little bit of demoing over here. And then obviously the pandemic hit. We just thought, we won't travel for a minute. Let's sit it out. And then obviously that's turned into like the last year and a half, so kind of unexpected, but it's been good. It's been good for the creativity, but now we're getting ready to come back to the UK because we're hoping that we're going to be able to play Focus Wales in October and and see everybody. It's too long to be apart from your loved ones, isn't it, in some respects? So, yeah, we're excited.
It's quite a funny vision, a Welsh person in Utah.
Somebody was just telling me last night, right? I've got some fun friends around here, I'm telling you. Somebody was just telling me last night that I think at some point Wales had the biggest immigration to Utah and the biggest Mormon conversion rate in the world at a certain moment in history. So it's quite interesting to me. There's actually quite a lot of Welsh connection and history here in Utah, probably more from a kind of a Mormon perspective, which isn't something that I'm particularly interested in, although I've met a lot of Mormons and they seem pretty decent on the whole. They don't rob your house when you go away on tour, so that's always
yeah, they're reliable for that.
Totally.
So was moving to Utah, was that like because, this podcast is about survival, for its namesake, it's about for better or worse, the jobs that you've worked between tours and between making records. But I mean, after 100 episodes or so, everyone's got their own story of survival. I mean, was moving to Utah part of your survival as continuing being an artist?
I think it's brought a different type of creativity. The fact that I've had this house here and the studio that we ended up building out here, I think it's given us a place, to kind of come and actually really realize a lot of the ideas that we've, that I don't know whether or not some of the writing would have been the same if we'd have done it anywhere else. It's always interesting to kind of reflect on that. But at the time, it was very much a whim. We'd been on the road for about 5 years straight, and we kind of moved out of our place in London. Just because we were on the road so much, and it made absolutely no point paying like London rent and then being there like fucking 2 weeks a year or something. So we've been living like lots of, sofa surfing and living out of suitcases and things like that. And I just came through here on such a cliched mother and daughter road trip. Like,
with your mum?
Yeah, my mum was going through a divorce, and I was like, right, come on, let's go and have this adventure and, clear our heads and that. And we ended up passing through this little town in Utah, and I don't know, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. So about a year later, when I was like, oh man, I can't fucking live out of a case anymore. I can't find anything. It's doing me head in. So I just ended up buying out here, and it was very... Well, it was very nicely unconscious. It just felt like the right thing at the time, and I didn't give it too much thought. But it's ended up being a really, like I said, it's been a really big part of the writing, the writing place for the band, and it's a lovely sanctuary to go to outside of tour. And I love having friends over, to stay, because it's a beautiful part of the world. So it's turned out all right for what was like a 10-minute decision.
For people like me and who are rubbish, absolutely rubbish, useless with geography, I just Googled where Utah is, and it's literally, a little bit west, but right in the middle, like near Nevada, where,
right.
Like I say, fairly uneducated, like it's the middle of nowhere. I mean, did that make you a little bit worried about the band and just being able to be there when shit happened? If you got like a Jules Holland spot next Friday, did any of that stuff play on your mind?
No, not really. I mean, I think I think sometimes when something feels right and feels good for you, I mean, the band has been, it's obviously a huge consuming part of all our lives, but I don't think it should ever come at the expense of everybody being happy. And I think we were at that point where like worry about that later. If you found, and that goes for any of us, if you found something that is is good for you individually, then it's only going to to make everything easier at the end of the day. The last thing you need is your band members not being I don't know.
That's really lovely to hear, because I think so many people have that thing where I feel like a lot of people in bands, there's a bit of a cliche. People feel lucky to be doing it, to be releasing records, to be touring and being part of that. And what you just said there, that can't come at the expense of your happiness. That's a really primary thing to think about, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably become more like I've almost become more aware of that in the past year. In a way, I think that's the one thing with them, the one positive from COVID and maybe being in a little bit more of a lockdown state is I do feel like music and kind of touring and that it's beautiful and it's energizing, and every day is different, but it doesn't always give you the time or the energy to sometimes focus on yourself. And so I think even though we've had that kind of embrace of wanting to look after each other, I think sometimes I don't feel like I've always reflected on, like I said, it can be very consuming, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not complaining, because I love what we've created and the career that we've had, but at the same time I feel like it's probably more of an epiphany that I've had this year, that it's also really important to to reflect on where you are and your own happiness, because ultimately you can make really good music when you're really angsty and your life's kind of falling apart, but it's kind of not sustainable either in a way, like it does sometimes bring good art and good creativity, but it's not always the best for yourself, your physicality and your mental health. So I kind of feel like I kind of feel like it doesn't have to, you don't have to be in that state to have something to write about or to something to stay. And I feel like I have been, I have been in worse places thinking that that's kind of like where you need to be to still feel fired up about making music. And this whole year has been it's been quite a different, in terms of actually addressing that and
Yeah, yeah,
almost having a new value that you can, that actually I kind of feel like the creativity and the songwriting this past 12 months has probably been the most fluid and beautiful ever. And that's strangely because I feel like I'm in a really good place, so it's the complete
right.
opposite of where I wrote all those early albums. So,
Yeah, yeah. Are there any moments or stories that you can think of that come to mind where you've had to kind of reassess what you're doing and double down on yourself?
I think 2016 was quite a difficult year. There was like a lot that tested us, I think, in that year. Well, we went and made this record that we all felt really excited about in Wales, and we really wanted to capture the performance side of what we do live. We really wanted to capture that in a recorded sense. So we went to North Wales and we started making Hitch, and we wanted it to be a very intimate kind of session between the three of us. So it was all self-produced, and we mixed it ourselves, and um, we were set up in my old childhood home in like right out in the sticks in North Wales, and just really enjoying being together and vibing and getting in a room together, and it felt like a really exciting album to make. And then just on the cusp of releasing that, we just started to feel like things were unraveling a little bit. Like we lost our then manager, we lost our label, we we got in we partnered up with a new label, and they really botched the distribution of Hitch. They were sending, it was a year late in terms of sending the vinyl to people, and they were sending, it's fucking comical now looking back, but they were sending fucking empty sleeves to people, not just once but twice. So there was like some of our fans were getting like fucking vinyl sleeves with no vinyl in it like twice.
Wow,
A
that's
year
mental.
later from when they'd actually ordered it.
What can you do in those situations? Because
Yeah.
you kind of usually see the things that you see things that go right. You don't see that shit that goes wrong that much unless you're getting an empty record sleeve. But what can you do in that situation?
Yeah, and I think that's where you kind of feel like out of control with it, because you've obviously created this body of work that you feel really passionate about, and we're very caring as people. Like we don't like to take the piss or make our fan base feel like we're not considering them, because
Yeah.
we've got a wonderful connection with our fan base. That's the one thing that has been so tangible to me across this 10 years that we've had together. We've got a lot of like a sincerity between everybody. Like it's a
Hmm.
community, and
Hmm.
that comes from actually like watering it and being decent and all those,
Yeah.
all those
Being
things,
present.
and being present. So to then have like a bunch of fuckheads sending out, like, and it's not coming from us, and we're trying to do this massive clear up, I mean, now it doesn't even, now when I describe it, it doesn't seem as atrocious as it was at the time, but there was something just so disheartening about the whole thing, and like the lack of
Yeah.
control, and you're just fucking apologizing constantly for something that you haven't done.
Cleaning up after other people.
Yeah. So after that record, we were so just kind of tired out by like
Yeah.
exactly that, how we felt like we weren't running our own, even though we do on a creative side. Isn't that the thing? Like we're so um strong about our musical integrity and what we want and what we put out there and the tours that we do, to then finally feel like, really from the business side, which is always like a shitty boring bit to talk about anyway, but the fact that that didn't go hand in hand with this, everything else that we'd created, we weren't finding the right partners who could actually support us in the vision, and the follow through, and actually, presenting it in the way that we wanted. So I feel like at the end of 2016, we were kind of like, oh, you know what? Fuck this. This is too stressful. Like, we're all skint because and we got sued at the very end of that year as well by the label that had fucking sent out all the wrong vinyl. They they wanted us
For
to pay,
what?
they wanted us to pay them back for a
Fuck
bunch of
off.
stuff. So it was like, so we had this like
I'm glad you
lawsuit.
can laugh about it.
Oh, I know. I mean, like, we've kept our sense of humor all the time because there is just something about you can't control everything on the external that goes on, but there was definitely a moment where we're like, man, we're skint, we're fucking tired from dealing with all of this shit. Like, we haven't found the support that we feel like we want, and deserve. And I think that's where the cusp of Arth starts, where we were kind of questioning whether or not to make another album. And we did this thing where I feel like we were very conscious of what we got rid of, how we reclaimed things back. We went through this kind of like complete shakedown of everything at the start of that record. And I think we had such fun by the time we went back in the studio. That's the thing that kind of reinvigorates you, and you're like, oh, I know why I do music. It's because it's for all these moments and the chemistry that the three of us have. And I think between that and having this big shakedown and actually deciding that we were going to do some things a lot differently, since then I feel like we've kind of brought the power back to us, and that's only really grown even more through the music club and the way that we started to manage our touring as well. So it was just like a lot of change in that moment where you kind of had to just hang on in there and go, well, I love this so much and I'm proud of who we are and what we are. So I'm going to just hang on in there, and I'm going to try and implement as much change as possible, so that we can end up with that not fucking happening again, because it's, waste of energy.
That embracing the internet. I mean, I remember when bands really started to embrace Twitter and Instagram, which is hilarious to think of now. But thinking about the music club, and that's a whole community where, well, that's what it is. It's a big community, and I feel like we're seeing that more and more with bands now. Idols being such a big one, and it's such a wonderful thing. You feel that connection with artists, and that must be so nice to feel that and be able to reflect that back to your fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously. We started the music club in 2019, so kind of late 2018 as well.
So you're quite early on, really, weren't you?
Yeah, it actually, it came before the pandemic and everything. I think the way that it's evolved and grown during COVID has taken us by surprise, quite a bit. It's really heartening that it's felt like people have wanted to support us. They've understood that, like, fucking hell, man, if all your touring gets cancelled for nearly 2 years, like, you have to, your bands are adapting, or they're not. How are they supporting themselves? It raises a lot of questions. If everything is so fragile that it all depends on a band going out and touring X amount of months a year, then the industry isn't as the dimensional element of the music industry where you're making money from recording and live. I think it's really shown how it's fucked up. It needs overhauling in a lot of ways, and I think the music club has been, like I said, it started off with the intent that we wanted to have like a place where people came and they listened to, other tracks outside of the traditional album system. And then that's obviously grown into a lot of online shows as well. But instead of being spread over all these platforms, which is good in some ways, but you can use it in a way because it gives you exposure to different people maybe, and maybe fans that wouldn't hear about you otherwise. But ultimately, a band shouldn't be spread over tons of platforms with everybody else telling a different story or not really being able to tell the full story. And your website almost ends up becoming like this dusty, fucking not even important place anymore. And you're just some sort of tag on of fucking Facebook or something. I think like what we've created and the platform that we've created and the fact that it's ours and it's our, it's our creative place that we can share with everybody. It's just felt great, and it's definitely something that we'd like to have, to kind of, I suppose, like to involve more bands with that kind of model as well. Because it's definitely, I mean, it's fucking supported us this year. I don't, on some level, I think we would have struggled to have made this album, and even getting reset to go back on the road. It's, even all the costs now, not wanting to be miserable about it, but when all your gear's been sat for 18 months as well, you gotta gotta check everything out before you go on the road, so.
And that's what invigorates me as a fan, seeing how these stories of how people make it work. And you mentioned there, this is a way for bands to make their own shit happen, so they don't have to be doing a bunch of other stuff on the side to be able to afford, keeping a website or checking your gear works before you even go on tour. Are there any kind of overarching solutions or ideas, that anything that you often find yourself coming back to in terms of the way that artists and the way that bands specifically can survive?
Yeah, I think this year has definitely put a bit of a fire, even more of a fire underneath us, in terms of really, and I guess kind of just being in touch with everything that you need to be aware of, I suppose, as an artist. So I guess that's been the thing, that being able to grow the club in the way that we have done, and create this, I guess it's if you're a band, I suppose we're maybe in a nice position as well, but I can see it working for new artists. Like, I think we came to a place where we realized that we had so much material that sometimes the way that we were releasing music felt a bit kind of slow through like a kind of a traditional, releasing schedule, like in the way that maybe partners and labels want to do it. So, and I think a lot of bands have adapted to maybe being able to record themselves as well, because obviously, when you are having to be a little bit more mindful of costs and things like that, can do some work at studios, but maybe not hours and hours or days and days, like before. So I think for us, knowing that what the output of material was, and being able to do really kind of exciting things with all that extra music as well, and kind of keep the rights to those tracks, and and have them live in a different place that kind of feels like, a bit special. We've been able to kind of create enough. We've had enough help with the technology, that we're kind of able to kind of do things in this one place. We have this backstage area where we can put a lot of music up and a lot of archival stuff, and we can host shows, and we can host Q&As and all that sort of stuff. So just like this really...
Is that taking control? It's taking control of your own shit and protecting it.
Yeah, that is definitely the big kind of the aesthetic of it all is, if you are able to do all of those things, like record yourself, and I think, again, this whole kind of chapter has obviously showed that bands are extremely capable of like recording themselves and putting on shows, and doing all these things kind of like in-house, between themselves. I think, a combination of sharing that wider, but also really understanding the value of that as well, that it's not just all out there for free. Let's just add to this rhetoric of just devaluing music even more. You know what I mean? It's not enough that it's like less than a cup of coffee sometimes. Like, now we're going to fucking do shows for free and stuff like that, like that isn't, I don't think, where we feel like we wanted to be. We wanted to give people a really good experience, and quality of the shows, and quality of the music, and and it kind of support the band to be able to keep on doing that. So it ends up, that we're coming together.
Being sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you, I mean, leading up to the kind of moments where you real, or like, those kinds of ideas started to germinate within you, I mean, in the early years of the band, did you find it hard to make the band your priority?
It was very much the priority from a creative point of view. Like it, like I said, that's always been a very consuming part of. Like I said, we write a lot, and we're always excited about uh, the next body of work that we're going to make. And we have a mobile studio, so we're kind of always writing and waking up in the
Wow.
night and scribbling things into notebooks, and like
Yeah.
that's just like a part of who we are. But I mean, I've I really feel like I've had to fast track a lot of the business side of things as well, in order to navigate some of the challenges of being a band, making sure that you don't just, you know, you can be like a really smart, involved band, and you can still end up feeling like you're about to get fucked all the time. Um,
How do you like square that off? How do you square that feeling off so that it's not always just kind of lingering there?
well, I think you have to, again, it's that sense, that difference, I guess, I was explaining about after 2016, where you kind of empower yourself instead of feeling like you're some sort
Mm.
of victim. Because obviously you've chosen to do music. You know that it's a difficult industry. You know, you know, you know that it has, and like any industry or any kind of career that you go into, you know that it's going to have turbulence. You know that it's going to go up and down. Um, you have to be, I think, extra wary. Like I said, there's a lot of different elements of it that can end up like taking little pieces from you if you're not careful, and if you're not protective of your brand and of your music. Um, but I think you have to look at it, like I said, not in this victimy way, like, oh, everything's
World's
look
against
at
you.
us, yeah,
Yeah.
everything's miserable and it's all hard, and um, it's like, what are the things that you can control? How can you um, keep the fire of your creativity? How can you not allow yourself to get dragged down, by all the stuff outside? And really, how can you make the creative element as stress-free, although not too comfortable. You know what I mean? Just about finding that middle ground of like not taking things too personally, knowing what it is that you want, sticking to your vision, and kind of just enjoying some of the ride as well, because it's like every day is different. It's quick, it's moving. You're at the helm of it. It's your own. You're self-employed. It's your own art. So
And in those formative years of like 18 to 25, think about that stuff. I mean, what can you remember from that period of time in terms of, in the context of this?
yeah, not a lot really, which is the problem, isn't it?
That's funny.
um, I remember feeling again that sense of being too affected by things, like how do you get the maturity where you don't take things to heart, that like you don't um you you are thick-skinned enough to see that with every failure there's growth as well. Sometimes you're not quite there at that age, are you? It
Yeah.
can lead to you not feeling good about yourself, and and it's obviously it's a place of of feeling judgment sometimes, isn't it? From
Mm, mm.
lots of different angles, your own personal judgment of like, um, are you good enough? How do you measure your success sometimes? I mean, I think that's something that you just kind of like, it comes with experience, and it comes with age, and it comes with like, I mean, I think I was pretty, I don't think you can even start in music unless you're pretty thick skinned and you let things bounce off you. For instance, I remember one of the first gigs we did in London, and this guy came up to me, some A&R douchebag, and said, well, I don't really know what's going on with the way that you look. You should sort of be looking more and snarling more like Courtney Love, but you're wearing a wearing a pretty dress. And he's
That's
being quite
ridiculous.
sweet, and you're just like, fuck off.
Yeah, you like do one.
you know
Do one. I mean, what do you say to that? Do you walk away? Do
well,
you
I
stick
think,
up for yourself?
oh yeah, I mean, I think that's the that's the interesting point, isn't it? Because to me that's like, what did you think of the songs, you fucking arsehole? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like you're just trying to find a fucking angle with everything, which,
Yeah.
you can definitely feel like at the start of a band that's being presented to the industry. It's, there's certainly been moments like that where it feels like the music can end up becoming so secondary to some of the other stuff, depending on who it is that's listening.
How much of you feel like, because that's like the classic, the kind of Lester Bangs kind of like rock and roll journalism. There are always these kinds of pictures and holes, shapes to fit into. I mean, how much, looking back on hindsight, how much did you ever like play that game or, sort of participate in that conversation, I suppose?
I think that's where I was, I think that's the one bit of it that never really occurred to me, like I'd grown up like loving all these artists and feeling like they were kind of themselves, that there was originality with all the artists that I liked, that they didn't, they weren't just one thing. They weren't, they didn't feel like they'd been polished, I suppose. That was always my favorite artists. So I think, like I said, I don't know whether or not it was naively, but it was quite jarring for me to then kind of go into the industry and feel like people wanted to fucking change you, because for me the I don't know, the ideal of music for me had always been like, be really truthful and honest and open to who you are, and that's what kind of makes great art, with all the flaws.
Yeah.
Your arse hanging out and all, do you know what I mean? Like it was never about like being shaped into something to make you more palatable to people or more recognizable. And I've definitely found that, less so now, but certainly in the early days of being like a woman in rock as well, it was like just wasn't enough references. I kind of felt like everybody was second guessing about what a female guitarist frontwoman should be or what they should look like. Do you know what I mean? Definitely had moments in my career of feeling like it confused people, which was astonishing to me. I was like, shouldn't it just be on the merit of what it is that you write and what you have to say?
Do you think you're in, and I'm so sorry if this is like a cliche thing to ask, but were the Manics quite a good band to look up to in that sense?
Oh yeah,
because
totally.
of who they were and because they were well read and from a working class background. You know what I mean? That they challenged all of these. Sorry.
No. I completely agree with you. Yeah, they were a huge influence on me growing up. The Manics. Even artists like, Elvis Costello, who felt like he just kind of did it. He was like my favorite growing up. Do you know what I mean? I think that's part of the reason I ended up getting into music, was because my mum and dad took me to an Elvis Costello concert when I was like 7 years old. And I think I was just mesmerized, but even, like, just the feeling that the artist is doing exactly what he fucking wants, like even Costello, he would do records that were a bit like different, like a chapter would change and all of a sudden he's not doing his punky stuff anymore. He's doing, more of a classical sounding record with Burt Bacharach, or he's, kind of swapped up the mood. He's doing something more jazzy, like I kind of feel like that what was exciting to me, that was that's what I admired, was like not just being one formulaic thing. It was like, growing and being able to change if that's what you want to do well, but you're still recognizably yourself even through those experiments, musical experiments or shifts. So yeah, it was definitely strange to me, that there might be a bit more of a kind of a machine. I don't think I think I was a bit naive in thinking that maybe there was a cookie cutter machine that kind of, occasionally cropped up. Like, you have to be like this or we won't accept you.
In those early years, especially, I suppose. I mean, did you have any part-time jobs, any full-time jobs even that shaped who you are for better or worse?
I had a lot, I worked in a fucking typical one, like worked in a video shop, because I had very
Nice.
flexi hours, so you could do that, and at least you got free movies. So that
Yeah.
wasn't too bad. The one that is very it's very kind of has a lot of memories attached to it with regards to the beginnings of the band was Rhidian and I managed to get temporary jobs. We just moved to London, and we'd met with Matt, and we were like, we had a lot of tours booked, and we were kind of really getting going with the first EP and everything. And Rids and I, by some miracle, managed to get these temporary jobs that were across the way from each other on Blackfriars Bridge. So he was working at some medical filing office where I think he had to go through like thousands of doctors' names and kind of like categorize them or something. And then I had a job across the way, which was a joke, which was I was the computer support department, where I was the first person that they would get on the phone when their computers were working, which now is just ridiculous because...
Well, you got your line, don't you? You got your first line. Have you turned it off and on again?
Exactly. That's all I think I ever fucking said during that period. And I think, honestly, I'm not kidding. We used to get, when the phone rang, it used to make you fucking jump off your desk chair because it hadn't rang for about 3 days, you know. So
great. It was not loads to do then.
Nothing to do, man. So they used to let me sit at this desk quietly, and they were like 7 other, you know, kind of more computer kind of geeky guys that were in the office, and then me manning the very first, you know, point point where people would come to, but it rang so rarely that I used to just sit there and I used to just write lyrics, and you know, I had little demos that I'd bring in on I had a little dictaphone back then, you know, and I'd be just writing lyrics and doing, and then Rhidian had a very similar, you know, boring job across the way, and he used to do artwork, so we'd meet on our lunch hour. You know, like, things like Greatest Light, you know, that's like all of Greatest Light was penned at a computer support desk. Do you know what I mean? Like,
brilliant.
Yeah, but you've got to make it work, haven't you? Like, it's like I said, it's expensive in London to live, and we could feel like things were starting to, we were getting a bit of momentum going just by having, you know, it was a strange one even moving from Wales, because we loved being in Wales, but we didn't feel like we had enough places to play live. You know, it was like we were having to go into Manchester quite a bit, and so it just kind of made sense to come down to London. We felt like, and our first manager ended up being in London based, so we just kind of thought, yeah, well, we'll try it. But then you obviously, you know, it's not a sob story. It's like if you just have to do it, don't you? Just juggle 2 or 3 jobs, you know, you do some bar work in the night, and you know, like I said, temp jobs in the day, and then we'd go out and we'd gig. You know, we were gigging like 3 or 4 times a week at that point, just to get really, you know, get our whole live set really crafted. You know,
Ace. Where were you playing? What venues to stick out for you for those kind of, you know, those regular gigs?
All sorts of pubs, and I don't know, the Dog and Dick. I don't know, all sorts of all sorts of like not like proper music venues. You know, like I said, kind of the more places where you could kind of just have experience of playing, but it wasn't necessarily like, you know, proper shows or anything. Anywhere we could get we could get a gig. At the time, it was, just lots of little venues.
I love that leap of faith, you know, like, were you having fun throughout all of it? And, you know, these are times that, you know, even within these little jobs that you've done and I've done and everyone's done, like there's fucking funny moments of them, aren't there?
Oh yeah, definitely. Lots, because, you know, there's a kind of it's that thing of when you know that you're doing something that you're not that passionate about, like a temporary job. Like I said, it was a sweet office and they treated me nice. You know, they'd say, "Where you playing tonight, Rhiannon?" Yeah. And I'd say, "Do you want to come?" And they go, "No." And you know, and everybody thinks that you're like, you know, oh, look at her trying to do music. You know, there was a kind of a vibe of that. but it kind of, it can give you the fire, can't it? Because you can see, maybe you get
Totally.
that totally that sense of like, well, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to go into something every day that doesn't make me feel really alive. Like I want to do, maybe it won't end up being music, but at least it's like, it's given me that insight that I want to do something that at least I find really interesting every day, that kind of keeps you, keeps you.
I feel like there's an element of like, fuck you, but in like kind of a positive way. You know what I mean? And just like no, that's like, this is good. This is good because I know what I don't want to do. And I know that that's going to kind of propel you towards something close-ish, closer to what you want to do.
Yeah, I think when it's hand in hand with something that you're so passionate about, that's when it really shows that, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of really contrastive that like, that like this doesn't give me energy in life, but this really, really does. So I think it made us throw ourselves into music. We were just really grateful. That's the word. Every day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, Rhiannon, this has been so much fun. I've loved hearing about all this. I mean, so much of that I'd never read before. I'd never known before.
Yeah, I think, at the time, it's always strange talking about things at the time. You don't, you almost don't think at the time. We were just getting on with stuff, and seeing where it would go. So you're not always, like I said, it's only recently that I feel like you can actually give a bit more of a sense of where the band began. It's almost like a retrospective view is almost easier than when we were in it at the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and
totally.
and again, it's like that whole thing. Like I've never wanted to be particularly moany about anything to do with music, and it's easy to jump on that, I think, sometimes, because
it's too obvious, isn't it?
yeah, and it's a choice. Like I said, it's if there's so much to be enjoyed by having a career in music, like the people that you meet and the places that you get to visit, and the friendships that we've made, like friendships that are going to last a whole lifetime. So I wouldn't swap any of that for having to deal with some of the bumps along the way. Tended to always, like I said, I think whenever we've had interviews in the past, tended to always kind of focus on what it is that we do really feel passionate about, which is the music. But now, with a bit of time, a little bit of time, you can look back and, like you said, you can almost see the comedy of some of the things that have happened in the past.
Thinking about the lyrical content of Into the Blue, and it has anything that we've talked about here. Does that play a part in it?
Yeah, hugely. Again, I think it's the whole album is about kind of it's kind of chronicling something that's been quite transformative from a personal perspective for me. Like I was talking before about like I feel like there's been like little moments of my life where I haven't felt like I've been completely in control. I kind of feel like I've just been being pushed along. And because of that, I've maybe fallen foul sometimes to some, to not feeling that great, or having bad relationships, or not really knowing what I wanted for myself. And I think this album is very much about reclaiming yourself and starting to embrace embrace those difficulties and uncertainty, like feel excited by life and all the surprises, instead of feeling like in some way that they're something to be feared. And that this album talks about that a lot, because like I said, I think I've gone through the most changes in the past 12 months whilst writing this record that I've gone through in the whole time that so I think it's definitely a song about an album, and the track as well, but about being vulnerable and being and allowing yourself to be open to growth, and not be frightened of what the future sometimes holds, and really anchor yourself, get your power back, don't let other people take that away.
That's a great message. I think every human, every animal needs to be reminded of that.
it's hard sometimes, isn't it? You know, like things happen, you have traumas in your life that happen and they make you doubt yourself. They make you question who you are and your confidence, and you know, you can be manipulated, or you know, you can, like I said, have people in your life that aren't good for you. And you know, and experiences that haven't been good for you. So like, as much, you know, being able to, the first step is being able to kind of like have enough time and, you know, belief to be able to, I suppose, recognize that and say, I don't actually want that anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a waste of the time that we do have, you know?
Absolutely. And maybe that jumps more straightforward and easier than it might seem at the time.
I mean, everybody has their journey, don't they? But I think when you do whatever it is that makes you suddenly realize that like something that's in your life isn't maybe serving you, or that you know, you're not getting what you want, or you know, you feel like things need change, you know, like I said, just being able to face that and try and push through it. Where and how does that epiphany come, you know, and how do you create that, you know, to get there? But you know, everybody deserves to have that moment, I think, where they're, you know, they maybe realize that that things, you know, that things can feel better, and that the you know, the future doesn't have to seem you know, so chaotic or so scary, or not exactly what you want it to be. So
Rhiannon, I love that. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed the last hour or so.
It's
50
been
minutes.
a good laugh, hasn't it? I've been doing a couple of different podcasts, and I've just found like you know, like just the conversation and the questions and everything. I've just found them like it just feel like they've just been very nice and connecting compared to some stuff that I've done over the years, which sometimes feels a bit one-sided or stagnant, you know? So like, I love how the podcast culture, and, you know, like, I don't know, it just feels like it brings, like quite a lot of depth, doesn't it? And thoughtfulness to, you know, to music and the conversation and all that sort of stuff. So I've been really enjoying them. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today and the questions and the conversation. Yeah.
So there was Ritzy Bryan from the Joy Formidable. Into the Blue is out now on Hassel Records. You know where to order it. Cheers for listening. See you next week.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.
Acast recommends more podcasts, more episodes, more great shows. Keep listening to hear a new season we recommend.
Fish fans are birds of a certain feather. They're not quite deadheads, they're not exactly parrot heads, and they're a far cry from juggalos. Many bands have obsessed and dedicated followers, but only Fish has fish heads. Undermine is a podcast narrated by the band's lyricist, Tom Marshall. That's me. And on this season of Undermine, we shine a light on the fish fan that lives down the block. You see them wearing clothes with donut-shaped patterns, and you hear them using strange words. They have their own slang, their own mythology, their own rituals, and their own rules. On this season of Undermine, we dive deeply into a devoted fan base that has spawned a countercultural revolution in your backyard. It's Undermine Season 2 this fall. Find us on Acast or wherever you get your podcasts. Presented by Osiris Media.
Acast recommends.